I'd like to call to order the Development Review Commission meeting for March 3rd, 2025. Can staff please call the roll?
Chair Lundstrom,
Present.
Vice Chair Leek,
Present.
Commissioner Dews,
Present.
Commissioner Bates,
Present.
Commissioner O'Connor,
Present.
Commissioner Mino,
Present.
Commissioner Sangri,
Present.
Councillor Winland is not here.
Thank you. There are some agendas or changes to the agenda. So for Councilor Wendland was going to make a visit tonight, but he's not with us. There was a lot of confusion back and forth, last minute changes. So we also will be moving into item number 3, which is the minutes, but we'll be postponing approving the minutes from the February 19th meeting to, I believe, March 17th is the potential scheduled night via Zoom to approve those minutes. So I think we can move into item number 4, which will be the public hearing continued from February 19th, 2025. So this public hearing will be based on LU 24-0036/AP25-01. It's a request for a modification of LU 23-0011, an RP district wetland re-delineation, and further adjustments to the RP District's 50-foot protected riparian area, also known as a PRA. The site's located at 13580 Goodall Road. Staff coordinators Ellen Davis, senior planner. The hearing on this project was continued from February 19th to allow additional written and oral testimony. So now I'd like to ask Deputy Attorney Boone to state the meeting procedures to the public.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you indicated, this is a continuation from February 19 for the applicant to submit new material. Testimony is not limited to the new material, but it would be helpful to the commission to do so for the limited time that you may have to speak. The public hearing process is as follows. There'll be a presentation by staff, then testimony by the applicant up to 20 minutes. Testimony by attorneys, representatives, and witnesses, which are a part of the presentation by the applicant, shall be counted within the applicant's time limit. At this point, I want to be clear because we had some questions that arose since the last meeting as to who the applicant is within that time, with that group. Our administrative staff advised me that Ryan O'Brien, Eugene Liu, and Bill Krosnogrovoff have signed up to speak, and those are all deemed to be part of the applicant team. If the Wallaces are here, anybody else from Red Hill Development, stormwater professional Chris Kettridge, and anyone from Stantec or the arborist Peter Van Oss, anybody from Tarragon, the broker, anybody else from FC Eugene Liu and R Max Equity Group, Goodall 16, including John Satterberg, Jeff Parker, anyone else from Community Financial Corporation, and anybody else representing any of those parties as attorneys, that would be the applicant group. Is there anybody else wishing to testify that is not in that group? Thank you. With that then, if that's the applicant's going to testify, then we can skip the recognized neighborhood associations, et cetera. So that 20 minutes for the time does not include time spent responding to questions from the commission. Testimony by attorneys, represented witnesses are counted within that person's time limit. It is after the testimony, and assuming there's no additional, then there would be no applicant's rebuttal, and then we'd move to the commission deliberation. That would include a statement to the applicant by the commission of any proposed conditions of approval different than contained in the staff report, and the applicant's response to the commission's conditions of approval proposed following commission deliberation. As stated in the public notice, the deadline for submission of any written materials was noon today. No written materials may be submitted to the commission tonight. Any person may, no, we've had the continuation, sorry. This land use request is to be considered based upon the applicable criteria and standards. The staff report lists the criteria that staff identified as applicable to the request. It was available online and from the planning department. Testimony and evidence should be directed towards the applicable criteria. We ask that you identify to the commission the criteria or standards you're addressing, so the commission may consider that testimony in relation to the criteria or standards. If you do not identify the criteria or standards you're addressing, the commission is not obliged to guess which standards or criteria you're addressing and testifying about, and may not consider your testimony its decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the commission and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue precludes raising the issue to the City Council and the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise any constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with specificity to allow the commission to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages of circuit court. As declared at the last meeting, a potential conflict of interest declared on behalf of each of the DRC members to the extent of their business or employment, which each will identify. Unless declared otherwise, the respective DRC member does not have a known, present, or anticipated future business relationship with the project or the applicant. It's possible that future business relationship could arise in initiation, design, construction, or maintenance of the project through either the employment or business of the DRC member personally or through relatives defined in ORS 244-020. At this point, I ask the commission members to please declare if you've had any ex parte contacts, including a site visit, since the last meeting. If you have any bias on the application, you need to declare at this time, and any financial conflicts of interest. And if you would, go ahead and state your business or employment. And before I hand that over, Commissioner Bates, you were not at the last meeting.
Was not at the last meeting, so I will be abstaining from this meeting.
You'll be abstaining from the meeting. Thank you. So proceed. Thank you. Commissioner Mino.
My name is Yuko Mino. I'm an architect. I have not visited the site and don't know the parties involved. I haven't had any ex parte communication. I do not have a financial interest or conflict of interest in this case, and I do not have a bias.
My name is Dwight Sangre. I'm a retired civil engineer. I am familiar with the site, although I have not made a site visit. I have no conflict of interest based on a financial or professional relationship, and I have had no ex parte discussion regarding this project.
I'm Helen Leake. I'm a realtor. I have not visited the site, although I know where it is. I've had no ex parte communication. I have no financial interest or conflict of interest in the case, and I have no bias.
My name is Larry Lindstrom. I'm a construction executive. I have not visited the site. I have not had any ex parte communications. I do not know the parties involved. I do not have a financial interest or conflict of interest in this case, and I do not have a bias.
Hi, I'm Russ O'Connor. I'm a retired senior project manager. I'm aware of the site, but I've had no ex parte contact, no bias, no conflict of interest, no financial conflict.
I'm John Dews, a retired architect, and I have not visited the site. I've had no ex parte contacts with the applicants. I have no bias nor financial conflict of interest in regards to this application.
Thank you. Is there any challenge to Commissioner's right to consider the application? Hearing none, before I turn over the mic to Senior Planner Ellen Davis, I just want to point out that at the center of the table, there's a countdown clock. It points the time. When it goes to 30 seconds, it'll turn yellow, and when it goes to red, time is up. Okay. Thank you. Senior Planner Ellen Davis, staff report.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ellen Davis. I'm still a senior planner for the City of Lake Oswego. And I'm going to start out tonight by mentioning that we received new exhibits into the record since the last staff memo, which was sent out on Friday. These are exhibits E26 and E27, as well as exhibits F21 through F24. Exhibit E26 and F21 were emailed to you on Friday afternoon, soon after the memo. Exhibits E027 and F22 through 24 were emailed out to you today, soon after the noon deadline. And I'm going to skip a recap for the site. Usually I kind of do more of a history and refreshing your memory, we were all together just talking about this pretty extensively just 12 days ago. So I'm just going to dive right into it, and one of the changes since the last time we met based on these new submittals. So this is Exhibit E23, and as you can see, the stormwater facility for the house is now located entirely outside of the RP district and no longer needs any sort of modification to the PRA buffer. So this is successfully showing avoidance of the PRA area for the stormwater facility for the dwelling. So that's great. And then up here, for the flow spreader, there is still some modification requested for permanent impacts to the PRA up in this area. And the flow spreader, for a little bit of a refresh, this is a stormwater facility that handles stormwater coming from off the site up in the northeast, getting piped down, coming down here, and it needs to go either in this diagram, it's shown kind of right on the boundary of the RP district, still with a modification requested within the RP district here, with the blue being the RP district, the red being the requested modification. So in this, it's kind of showing the flow spreader slightly outside of the line. We don't have a specific plan for the exact stormwater design at this point. This is feasibility. Engineering still needs to get an stormwater drainage report, an accurate design, construction plans. But at this feasibility scale, when we're looking at relatively small modifications to this PRA, and the flow spreader either located here or it might move a little bit closer to the actual boundary of the PRA. Either way, this is something that staff believes can be supported, in part because this area has already been graded and prepared for this construction. So it's not going to cause additional impacts outside of this area that's already had grading and like a base material placed in preparation for this stormwater spreader, as shown in this diagram from the applicant's presentation last time. And the flow spreader has less flexibility in where it moves. I guess I can go back over here. So the stormwater planter for the dwelling, as we talked about last time, really has a lot of flexibility to move around on the site. The flow spreader, though, needs to be able to achieve a gravity flow from this pipe coming from downhill, or from uphill, because water needs to flow downhill. And it needs to be located along a contour line in order to spread equally. My engineering colleagues can come up here and actually explain the engineering more accurately than I can. But there isn't as much flexibility for where that can move within the site. You know, you can't necessarily put it over here. Its purpose is to help recharge the wetland, so placing it as close as possible to the wetland on a contour where it can flow evenly and recharge the wetland really is ideal from an engineering and a wetland maintenance perspective. So staff is recommending approval, especially because this has minimized impacts to the PRA based on the initial proposals. So we've got a much smaller area, only 680 square feet of modification of the PRA now proposed. So staff is actually able to recommend that approval. And I kind of showed here so we're past the deadline to submit new written evidence into the record. And again, this is all just feasibility, and more precise construction engineering plans will need to be submitted to the engineering team for their review and their approval, and then it will need to be constructed according to plan on site before there can be occupancy of the dwelling. But this is kind of an idea of where that flow spreader might ultimately end up, still within the same area requested for modification, but the ultimate planter spreader might be a little bit closer to that PRA boundary as fully designed. And I don't believe I have too much else exciting to say about that. We're able to recommend approval of the PRA modification. I'm kind of going with this Exhibit E24 as my recommendation. It appears to be the same as E23, but because that showed a specific flow spreader location, which might change when they're actually getting into the nuts and bolts of designing the engineering construction drawings, I decided that this drawing might kind of be the better one to refer to since it just shows the area for the PRA modification rather than showing any specific engineering design. So staff now recommends approval of the PRA modification shown in red on Exhibit E24. There was also an exhibit submitted, Exhibit F23. This was submitted by Mr. O'Brien of the applicant's team, and this is a request to modify condition of approval B1 of the staff report, LU 2436, to change the terms on each parcel to on the parcel requested for occupancy. There's actually already a title for this all of the B conditions, which is that they need to be completed prior to the final building inspection or occupancy of any dwelling on any parcel. So staff doesn't really see this as a major change. So staff isn't opposed to the modification to this condition. We just don't see it as necessary. The applicant still needs to plant all of the required mitigation on Lot 9 prior to final occupancy either way. So it's not really making a change for us in what would be required for the applicant or for the site. So based on all of this, I'm keeping it short and sweet. Staff recommends approval of the map correction, the redelineation, PRA adjustments on lots 7 and 8, as we talked about last time, and now staff is able to recommend approval of the PRA adjustment on lot 9, as shown in exhibits E23 and E24. And to make it a little easier on you all, I have updated the numbers on the recommended conditions, and this is also from last time. We talked about the minimum width of the mitigation area on parcel 9, or PRA area on lot 9. This was something that it sounded like the applicant was okay with last time. I've just updated the number up here to reflect the additional PRA modification staff is now recommending approval of. Again, down here, updating the mitigation area from 17,860 square feet, missing a Q there, oops, to 19,900 square feet. And that again is just to show a 3-to-1 mitigation ratio required for the additional square footage that's now proposed for approval.
And I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt because I created this issue. The PRA adjustment, the increase decrease is actually 1-to-1. So when I said 2,040, that was my mistake. It's actually 680 square feet plus
For the mitigation?
for the PRA creation. So there was some additional PRA creation.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
Okay.
So I just wanted to step in and clarify.
This number should be 680. This number should not be 2,040. This number should be 680. As I talked about last time, when we're talking about PRA modifications, when we're taking away a square foot of wetland over here and adding a new square foot of wetland over here to make up for it, it's a 1-to-1 square footage. So this condition A1 should be 680 now because staff is recommending approval of 680 square feet of modification, taking away wetland in that area up here and adding it probably on the south of lot 9. So that 680 square feet going away over here should be added at the bottom. And then down here, the number is correct of being a 3-to-1 mitigation ratio for that additional 680 square feet. I'm sorry, I made that far more confusing than that needed to be.
I did, so I apologize.
But that is really it for the staff presentation. I do have colleagues from engineering here who can come up and help to answer if there are any more technical questions about the engineering aspects of the flow spreader or kind of anything else. Thank you.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I have a question that is more background for me. The flow spreader is there because there's runoff from a parcel above this development?
That is correct. I can ask my
And was
colleagues from
that a
engineering.
condition of the recording of the plat, that they had to mitigate that runoff?
I don't remember.
And isn't it the responsibility of the uphill people to mitigate their own water flow?
There is uphill water that has historically flows downhill, right? the downhill property has sheet flow then going across the property. If you want to alter that sheet flow, the downhill property needs to alter it. When water flows, you have basically an applied easement to continue to allow the surface flow to occur that has occurred over time. You know, it's a natural condition. So if you want to change that, then the applicant has to decide how you can change it, but still basically route the water around the development.
Okay.
So that it flows down to the wetland still.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? I have none. Now we are moving forward with the public testimony. Any particular order? Have you guys decided how you want to do this? Do we understand the 20 minutes and spreading of the time, understanding the procedure? Any questions there prior to getting started?
My name is Ryan O'Brien, and my staff already made my presentations. They said exactly what I was going to say. We think that 680 square feet is really the better place to go. That area that you saw graded on the aerial photograph, that's cement treated. That was because that was done in the February of 2024, so it's as hard as a rock. I've talked to Sean Eisner, our wetland consultant. He says it's no longer actually a PRA. It's not suitable for being a PRA. So it's better to put that storm flow spreader right adjacent to existing grass areas that are part of the PRA. So we agree with everything staff says. The only thing I got to say is that that the LIDA planter on the south, further to the south, we can't absolutely guarantee that that's the right size because it hasn't been approved by engineering. We think it is. Our engineers feel pretty confident about it, but it might have to be a little bigger. We don't know. But I'm going to turn it over to Bill here at this point. He's going to make the presentation because he actually was still, they would still, Bill, the builder and the homeowners still want to go to the option number one, and they want to explain their case.
That's a 26-page presentation.
Any questions of me? Okay.
I have none. Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Bill Krasnogro. I'm with Red Hills Land and Design, doing the vertical development of this site. And with the constraint of time, I'm just going to jump into it. Dear committee, I'm presenting to you today on behalf of the Wallace family. They have been subject to inconsistent code interpretations by the planning staff, resulting in impossible demands and disregarding for key factors such as existing disturbed PRA, tree preservation, fundamental construction practices. The only reason that can help explain such unreasonable action from staff is their personal vendetta against the team that's presenting this proposal. I will lay out these issues before you so that you can see how frustrating it is for my clients to see staff going beyond the reach of code and common building practices to simply prevent this design revision to the previously approved LIDA facility and PRA encroachment. And I'll start with the impossible demands that the planning staff keeps tossing the term possible when we're talking about the location of the facility. And the space that needs to be used. I agree with this statement 100%, that the facility needs to be placed where possible off-site. However, I assure you that many stormwater engineers have looked at many options and have determined the best possible location for this facility as depicted in option 1. The only dilemma here is that the extent of staff's definition of the word possible. I'm sure we all understand that the storm system has many constraints, such as simple physics and gravities, laws of gravity, occupants and public safety, available construction materials and methods to us, the system cost, impact to the environment, just to name a few. Contrary to what staff is still trying to make everyone believe, I'd like to explain in a bit more detail how these constraints make avoiding the PRA encroachment not possible. The simple physics and the laws of gravity, I'm glad staff pointed out. The location of the facility must be below the lowest discharge point. Water does not flow uphill, and I'm glad it's been commented here on that. Planning staff has been especially ignorant of this simple fact on this submittal specifically. The original approval of 4,100 square feet of adjusted PRA was approved heavily weighing in on this fact with only one proposed location for the LIDA facility. No additional options were required. Staff was able to approve such a large PRA adjustment using and meeting the exact same code criteria under question today. Next, in regards to occupants and public safety, this is a 4-generation home. The original LIDA facility to the east side of the property had some flaws that were missed in the design process and the city staff review process. The natural slope of the lot wasn't fully taken into account, so the facility needed to be buried very deep underground. Due to the constraints of the proximity to the existing home and the depth of the system and the nearby trees, this LIDA facility became impossible to build. It looked good on paper. However, as an on-site planning took place, we realized that the structural safety of the dwelling and the construction crews was in extreme danger with this location. The finished elevation of the facility was expected to be 8.5 feet below the surrounding grade level, making this facility dangerous to the occupants and public after completion. Additionally, the second design attempt to keep all improvements outside the PRA also creates a dangerously tall wall to occupants and public. Next, I'd like to talk about the available construction materials and methods. As a residential home builder, I am limited to construction materials and construction methods that make residential homes possible. Staff refuses to acknowledge this fact. For example, if someone asks me if it's possible for me to fly to the moon, I could answer this question with two very different interpretations of the word possible. One answer would be including every available technological advancement and opportunity with no limitations whatsoever, resulting in the answer of yes, it's possible for me to fly to the moon. The other answer would be a realistic look at my resources, health condition, financial limitations, and so on, resulting in a very firm answer of no, it's not possible for me to fly to the moon. Unfortunately, the planning staff is refusing to acknowledge these very evident limitations on where the LIDA facility can be built with a specific application. However, previously, we were able to acknowledge all this in an original approval of 4,100 square feet of PRA adjustment. Next, I'd like to talk about system costs. In most cases of residential construction, the limit of possibility hinges on one thing, and that factor is the project cost. Planning staff has repeatedly stated that the cost should not be a determining factor in facility placement. However, in the real world, in the construction, the financial feasibility is a key consideration. A design that is technically possible but financially unviable is, in practical terms, not possible. I would like to point out that the most recent LIDA proposal emailed to Joanna on February 27, which attempts to keep all LIDA facilities outside the PRA, will require for about half dozen mature trees to be removed and adds over $100,000 of costs to an already expensive system. This option presents an unreasonable financial burden, making it not possible within the scope of the project. Additionally, the second design attempts to keep all improvements outside the PRA areas, requires for nearly a 14-foot retaining wall. This is unnecessary and makes this option financially impossible. Next, I'd like to talk about the impact to the environment. I'm glad to hear that the staff has changed their mind on this just today, but the prior approved disturbance area for the LIDA facility has already been scraped of all topsoil and vegetation. The area was already graded using cement treat structural fill methods, and utility storm lines have already been ran to this area. This previously approved 680 square feet PRA area has already been developed and will never carry any of the characteristics of the natural PRA area as it does in undisturbed sections that we propose to replace it with. I hope you can see that the disturbance area, staff is refusing to acknowledge this simple fact in prior meetings. Next, I'd like to talk in a little more extent of this environmental and this regarding the existing area. When we talk about staff's inconsistent application of code requirement, the impact to the environment is the most obvious display of such pushback. That is against everything they should be standing for. They have mentioned multiple times that the new PRA is starting from a clean slate and no prior approvals have any weight. This contradicts previous approvals and established code standards. The prior approved disturbance area for the LIDA facility has already been developed and will never carry these characteristics as it does in the undisturbed sections that we propose to replace it with. The fact that the 680 square feet of the PRA has already been disturbed and graded should be on staff's main priority to replace this undisturbed PRA area. However, staff continued arguing against their own logic and intent of the code to further complicate the project for the developer. Unfortunately, this too points to reasons of denial of their prior application outside of code restrictions and compliance by staff. I hope you can see that the current impact to the prior approved disturbance area is sufficient for a basis to relocate the PRA to an undisturbed area. Additionally, planning staff in their original denial failed to acknowledge that the isolated wetlands as not having any trees. Ryan, along with the Wallaces, had an uphill battle to prove that the patch of isolated wetlands did not have any trees on it, as you could clearly see on the plans depicted as a simple fact, and therefore only needed a 30-foot PRA spacing versus the 50 that the planners tried to impose. These variations of code interpretation by staff is being applied inconsistently to this applicant's detriment. Next, I'd like to talk about tree preservation. Joanna and Ellen, in their email responses to Jeff Parker on the 27th of February, have stated that the planning department is willing to approve the latest proposal to run the city's failed facility of stormwater that's overflowing into Goodall, Oswego Reserve, along the east and the south side of the property. The planning department was willing to compromise about a half dozen mature trees that take over 50 years to establish instead of allowing for a minor PRA adjustment. This decision contradicts the intent of the code and raises concerns about whether the rationale aligns with the established code requirements, or if it is based on considerations beyond standard code enforcement. Our proposed PRA adjustment will require for 0 additional trees to be removed and will focus on preserving the natural vegetation corridor for wildlife. This decision raises serious concerns about fairness and consistency in the application of tree preservation policies. It is more than obvious that the applicant is being mistreated and bullied by the planning staff as they continue to push against all logic. I would like for the DRC to take a close look at these actions and make sure that these abusive demands to the environment, your time, my time, and the entire applicant's team are not a common occurrence with staff personnel. They are here to implement the intent of the code without weaponizing themselves against individuals or teams they have personal issues with. Next, I'd like to talk to the simple common sense construction practices. Staff has been repeatedly questioning the fact as to why the original approved LIDA structure were not fully built yet. There is a very simple answer and a more detailed answer. I'd like to give you both. The simple answer is this: we are not done with the project yet, and there are plenty of uncompleted scopes on this job. The more detailed project is, as a general contractor, it is my responsibility to review the entire scope and make sure that all aspects of constructions happen in the correct order of operations. It is contrary to common sense to construct obstructions that block access to the southern portion of our site until all scope needing to be built is complete. The western LIDA facility has been prepared for construction and graded during the foundation backfill. This area was also used for construction staging. Completion of the LIDA facilities would be to the completion of the job. LIDA facilities need to be regularly maintained for them to continue to work as designed. Keeping the facilities to close proximity to vehicle access is crucial. Option 1 demonstrates the best location for the routine maintenance and emergency access. The LIDA option 1 is in fact the least intrusive and the only possible choice for the PRA, as it already has 680 square feet of irreversible disturbance area. All utility lines have already been ran to this location. The grading has been prepared for the LIDA facility. All we are asking for is an alteration of approximately 800 square feet additional to build our LIDA facility. And if the failed off-site water that is requiring the flow spreader is added to our design, we will be needing about 1,200 square foot of additional encroachment. More importantly, the developer's engineer staff noticed, well, I'd like to leave it at that. You could see that there's an extreme amount of cost that is involved in building these 14+ foot walls that make it impossible in a residential setting to build off-site. And as Ryan has said, the design that's proposed is basically using up everything we can, and we're still not sure if that area can be used, but the cost is astronomical. The current design already has nearly 8-foot tall walls. The area is prepped and designed for it. Why should we make the occupants of the home and their friends and visitors allowed to be having to work around and live around an unsafe area that has steep drops, steep walls? Everybody's got constraints, and my client has constraints, financial constraints. I agree this is a great, beautiful home, but there's a limit to what everybody could spend on the project. So I wish you could, I plead with you that you look at this information and understand that compromising or the compromised PRA is already compromised. And the additional PRA is insignificant and does not damage the wetlands whatsoever. We're just seeing pushback for reasons that I do not fully understand or know, but they're against common logic and principles. And I can't believe I'm actually done 3 minutes early. Any questions for me?
Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a couple questions. Could you go back to sheet E014, sheet 3, I think it was? Yeah. Can you explain what this facility is that's running down the east and the south end of the property? Is that a new location for the storm flow spreader?
Yeah, absolutely. So contrary to what Mr. Boone was saying, the city facility uphill from us is leaking water. It's a failed system that's been leaching water. So this option is one of 2 options that was recently provided to the planning staff. And they gave approval, or at least they gave consent saying that they will allow for these systems to be approved if they're outside the PRA. However, the bypass line on this proposal was going alongside the eastern and southern line, with the flow spreader being kind of where it's pointed, just west of the pool. And that path would require an additional 6 trees to be removed.
I'm just not understanding where the location of where it was shown before, why that wouldn't still remain.
So this was one of two. So the latest proposal that Ryan had and that Ellen spoke about today is the second option. However, the planning staff was willing to approve either one of these or support the approval of either one of these.
Okay. Second question, and just help me understand this. What was presented during the staff report for the approved location for it, and which the previous applicant speaker had said would be acceptable. If that's the case, why are we looking at something else if that's something that the applicant and the city are now in agreement with?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I'm glad you raised that question. So just like the originally approved eastern facility that we had, that elongated facility alongside the east side of the property line, it looks good on paper, but it's not functional. It's dangerous and it is extremely expensive. We need to carve 14 feet deep into the hillside, build nearly
I'm not talking about what was on the eastern side before. Yeah. I'm talking about what was just presented this evening.
Yeah, so this is the facility that was presented. If you look at the cross section of it, this is the system that was presented by Ryan.
And that has been, it was to be acceptable to the applicant.
It does not. It's still, it looks good on paper, but it's impossible to build because, so this is the facility we're talking about here.
Well, what did I hear from the previous speaker?
So it looks good on paper. What makes it impossible is the financial constraint and having to carve into the hillside 14 feet deep and have retaining walls and have a drop in the wall of approximately 8 feet. As depicted here.
Which one of you is speaking for the project? The person that had said would be acceptable, or you? I'm very confused.
So we're presenting as a team. The city staff required or requested that we provide other options. These other options were already considered within our teams and were walked away from because of the constraints. It's a stormwater facility that's not going to be used for the occupant. It's there to filter out the water and let it go into the PRA, essentially making it a habitat space for wildlife. So the temporary encroachment in an area that is feasible to build and is possible to build is the best location. That's option number one in the material that we presented.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm still confused.
Could you go to the drawing that shows your proposal number one, and how does it differ from what staff is amenable to?
Oh, maybe I'm holding this thing upside down. I'll get there in a second.
And are you saying that the spreader is the issue or the LIDA?
So they're both encroaching. So our LIDA would be encroaching. So I'm glad that the staff agreed with what we've been trying to tell them all along, is that the existing PRA that was allowed for us to be encroached has already been developed. It can never be PRA. It's got cement in the dirt. So that's the 680 square feet. We need an additional 800 square feet to get our LIDA facility built. But if we also incorporate, and I think this is the most feasible space that has the incorporation of the flow spreader, then we're able to bring it down to, or increase the encroachment to about 1,200 square feet, additional to the already disturbed area.
So we're 1,200 square feet apart.
Exactly.
That's it.
That's it. And it's increasing costs by tens and thousands of dollars in a system that even our engineering staff can't guarantee that they could make that work. They're trying to use up all the space they can not looking at cost, not looking at livability, not looking at safety, just providing you an option that would hopefully include that. But even as designed, the discharge is not meeting grade, and it's more than likely going to require encroachment in that southwestern portion of the facility.
And all this is so that you don't encroach upon the pool area.
No, this has nothing to do with the pool area. We're limited to elevations with our facility. Yeah. So it can only be in that area.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, thank you.
So what I'm understanding is even though we had a review by the city of a particular proposal, that is not financially the direction that you want to go because of the high retaining walls.
Safety, retaining walls, and excavation, yes.
Right. So the one that you are saying that is your proposal is option number 1, which I guess is shown on this E009 sheet 4?
Correct.
Okay. And this then has a retaining wall of how high?
It's 8 feet.
8 feet.
Correct.
Now, is that of what the fall height is, or is that the whole height of the T retaining wall?
That's the entire retaining wall. So a portion of the wall is buried the way the facility is designed with the drainage and filtration. So it's the entire wall.
Okay.
And the highest point that's exposed is not expected to be over 4 feet on the western side.
Right. It also appears that it doesn't make much sense to have the flow spreader diverted to the other side of the building where it's affecting trees, and that's a wildlife corridor.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more questions for me?
Any other questions?
I guess my question is, what are we deciding here?
We aren't deciding yet.
Okay, but when dust all settles, the city has proposed some acceptable things with conditions, and the applicant is saying that's a no-go.
Well,
That's my understanding as well.
question for you. What was shown by the city tonight, was that developed by the applicant?
So it was developed by our team.
Yes.
However,
So it wasn't the city's proposal, it was your proposal?
no, that's because we already gave them 5 proposals. They wanted more options, and we
Understood.
provided that.
I just want to make
Yes,
sure
correct.
this is not the city's design, this is yours.
Absolutely. We were forced to give them another option, and yeah, this was scratched off the table a long time ago.
Forced or not, it was something that they felt was acceptable, and that I'm hearing that is acceptable from your applicant as well.
No, it's not.
No, it's not
they're
acceptable.
1,200 They're 1,200 square feet into the PRA short.
With option 1, I think we're talking about 2 different options here.
Well, again, I want to get back to then, what was the first speaker saying that would be agreeable?
So when we're looking at coverage area, yes. But when you're looking to carve into a hillside 14 feet deep, this is where it's impractical and not possible from a residential home build standpoint.
Yeah, that was what I was trying to clarify when I spoke, was that it was the construction costs and the height of the wall that made it less feasible, maybe not possible, and that's why you're saying it's really more this option 1 rather than the one that we saw earlier.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah. It's just that when we have the information coming from you and we have 2 proposals,
Yeah.
and then you're the one that's deleting the first proposal because of the cost, that's unusual.
Yeah, and like I said, we were forced to provide another option, and we've provided all the options. We tried to reason with staff to make them understand why this is important. And the only other option is this extremely expensive and intrusive option.
Yeah, we don't have to repeat that. We already
Okay.
know that.
Thank you.
I do want to say something, though. In my many, many, many years in design and construction, attacks on the people that you're trying to work with are not positive and burn bridges in the future.
Yeah, I'd really appreciate the advice. And I do apologize if it came across that way. I'm limited on time and try to be quick, but we're also frustrated because we've been working on this for a very long time, and I hope you can understand that too.
Yeah, it's understandable. Absolutely understandable. So that, I'm trying to think of how do we move forward with this? Because the option that was shown that it was possible
Is unacceptable.
is unacceptable. So when it was said it was impossible, provided a design that was possible prior to, that would be acceptable as long as it met engineering and design. But then there's the cost concerns tied in. I'm just saying this out loud to make sure everybody's understanding exactly what's going on here.
I know there are 3 minutes left. I'm a homeowner. I'm sorry to interrupt. Would it be okay if I spoke?
Please come up to the counter and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry, I have throat problems. My name is Dwight Wallace. My wife Jody and I are the homeowners. I understand we're limited on time. I first want to thank all of you. You're obviously very accomplished, and I appreciate you taking the time, and I want to thank the city for their efforts too. I come in peace. Look, I'm not looking to cause any issues. As I said in my write-up, I believe it is truly fair to allow us to do Proposal 1. It's just fair and pragmatic. The reason we're disjointed, number one, I'm not a developer or real estate investor or anything like that. I'm just a homeowner, and we have been a little haphazard, and I apologize for that. The reason there's so many options is we've been trying to meet the request of the city. Give us options. Let's see what else we can do. And we really scrambled to come up. We scrambled at the 11th hour to come up with this option that was approved, but it's not feasible. It's just that when you dig in, to me, the heaviest weight is with the man who has to do it. And he's saying we can't do it. And my biggest concern and my wife's biggest concern is safety of our grandkids. And I don't want an 8-foot wall in the back of my yard. And I'm sure y'all can understand that. And what we're talking about is a patch of dead weeds here versus a thing of grass about twice as far as that wall with a big, beautiful tree. And we're swapping it from that to that. And there's no harm. And I know I don't have the background and the intelligence of some of these people who have lived this for years, but I'm just applying common sense. And that's my request. And I appreciate you taking time. And again, I apologize if our presentation has been confusing this morning or this evening, but really what we want is option 1. Option 1 is feasible, and it's good for the environment. It's good all the way around, and that's our request that you look at it. And I think if we're all pragmatic about it, I think it makes sense. So thank you.
Thank you.
So I guess at this point, is there anything you would like to say, Attorney Boone?
Well, if we've had all the testimony,
Okay.
we'll close the public hearing,
Yes.
right? If staff has any comments, then we'll move to deliberation, would be my suggestion to you.
I do have just one comment, and that's to,
If we've
Sorry.
had all the testimony, you can step away from the testimony bench.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right.
Yeah, we do. 1 minute and 33 seconds.
Okay.
And
Can I speak real quick?
who are you?
My name's John Satterberg. I'm the developer.
You're one of the applicants.
Yeah, you probably know me by now. And what Bill is wanting to do is the first option we showed with the flow spreader and the 600 square feet where the concrete was where we're going to put the flow spreader. Bill wants to put the LIDA facility up there with an 8-foot wall instead of down here with a 14-foot wall. That's what he's asking for. And it makes perfect sense to have those two together so the water will flow out. I don't know if Bill was very direct in saying that's what he wants to do. Which slide is, where's the other slide? You can see this one. He wants to do the green in the middle, right? And where's the other? There's another slide somewhere.
Got it in her computer.
On the clicker.
Okay, but I don't know how to do the clicker. I got 45 seconds. So can you click it to the,
Forward or back?
you know what I'm talking about? Okay, go. That's, all right, back. Go back. Okay, he doesn't want to build that one. See the red outline there? He doesn't want to build that one. That's the 14-foot wall. Nobody wins on that example. He wants to go up where the flow spreader was to be and put the LIDA facility there. That's what he's looking for.
Thank you.
Time's up.
Okay, I'll push that over to administration or city staff. Any comments?
Yeah, I'm glad that this, sorry, Johanna Hasty, Planning Manager. I'm glad that this, actually, can you put it back up? Sorry. Glad that that exhibit is there. Just want to clarify that staff at no time has reviewed, approved, or centered on this, the flow-through planter and that line coming down the east side and south of the future conceptual pool. We didn't review that. It wasn't shown on the exhibit that came in on the 27th from Jeff Parker, and that is Exhibit E-022. The only thing that was shown on Exhibit E-022 was the LIDA planter that is completely outside of the protected riparian area. And I am sympathetic to the applicant's issues that he's raised about cost and feasibility and the height of the wall. But I want to remind the commission that, one, the applicant has requested and received approval to modify the RP district. And we now have, instead of one large wetland, we have an isolated wetland and a larger one associated with Nettle Creek. Now, with less encumbered area, we still are back to, can we avoid impacts to the protected riparian area? That's first and foremost. And then the second question is, can we minimize it? And then we can talk about mitigation. Now, the proposal from Ryan O'Brien, who is the applicant's representative, was put together with Stantec, Chris Kitteridge from Stantec. That is Exhibit E-023 and E-024. And we can reference the staff's PowerPoint presentation if you'd like. But that proposal, which has the flow spreader in an area of PRA reduction, we are willing to look at that because we can also create PRA down south of the house in this future conceptual pool. So there's a balanced cut and fill, if you will, 1 square foot to 1 square foot. So they're still allowed to reduce the protected riparian area. They couldn't avoid it completely due to contours, due to the location of that and where it needs to come down on the north side of the house, down on to the west. Again, what you're seeing here with this red line on the east was never in front of staff, or at least it wasn't a part of what Jeff Parker presented on the 27th and what Ryan O'Brien is recommending here today. So we have a PRA reduction. We can't fully avoid it. We can't fully avoid that stormwater spreader going there, but we can minimize it. It's an area of disturbed area, a disturbed part of the protected riparian area. We've accepted that. But the LIDA planter itself, that is still under the avoid, minimize, mitigate. Can you completely avoid it? Now, what we have said, and again, I understand that they haven't done the updated drainage report, and we still have to dig out into the details, or the applicant does. But what we're looking at with a land use application is feasibility. They have shown that it is feasible to put a LIDA planter outside of the protected riparian area, and that is first and foremost the step that we have to take with looking at protected riparian area or RP district impacts. So again, I know that there's been a lot of emotion and a lot of frustration, and I understand the concerns that have been raised today. They're very legitimate, but our code is first avoid, and then minimize, and then impact. So I just want to emphasize that when you move into deliberations.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
First, avoid impact. So to avoid the impact, it would be 14-foot walls.
Yes. So I think if you remember at the first public hearing, there was discussion about, well, it's out of character to have a planter on this. It's out of character, it's not the owner preference, it's not what we want.
It doesn't apply.
It doesn't apply. So again, it's not, I understand their concerns, but they've shown that it's reasonable, that it's feasible, I should say, to avoid putting the LIDA planter in the protected riparian area, whereas option 1 does not.
And the difference is 1,200 square feet of riparian area.
Correct.
And the difference is 14 feet walls versus 8-foot walls.
Correct. It sounds like, again, we don't have a lot of details about that. What we've seen are graphics. We don't have a stormwater, a revised stormwater management plan. We don't have a revised stormwater drainage report. So the commission tonight can determine whether or not you have sufficient information to move forward and make a decision. And again, at a land use application phase, what we're looking at is feasibility. If it is not feasible, then we have to address that then. If you approve this, if you approve option 7, basically, and it turns out to not be feasible once they start digging into it, then you have to come back.
It's my understanding that whether it's an 8-foot or a 14-foot high wall, a portion of that is under the grade. It's not the full height of the exposed wall.
That is my understanding as well. Again, what I've seen tonight are just graphics. What we've all seen tonight are just graphics.
When does it become determined something is feasible?
So again, feasibility is, we're not asked, you do not have a revised stormwater drainage report. You do not have the details for the planter itself. Even if it was, you are not required as the DRC to approve a particular design because you don't have that expertise. What you are asked to do and what staff is asked to do at the land use phase is kind of at the 1,000-foot level. If it is feasible, if the applicant has given us information and stated that they think it's feasible to move forward with this stormwater management plan, then that's what you have at your level. And then from there, you go into permit review, you look at the actual factual evidence, the infiltration rates, the footings, the design of the stormwater planter, whatever it is. And that's at the permit. So that's not, anything more than feasible is not in front of the commission.
I remember in previous testimony, it was already said that the footings for this 14-foot wall or huge walls are just like 6 feet.
Yeah, and it might be necessary to look at different options for those footings and those walls. Again, with the new delineation that they have requested and staff is recommending approval on, they have an area outside of the protected riparian area, outside of the RP district, in which to locate a stormwater planter. They actually have a lot of area outside of the RP district to locate a lot of development. So we're focused on this LIDA planter here. But again, nothing south of the dwelling has been proposed.
Just to clarify, Ms. Hasty, the proposal to put the storm spreader on what I will call the northwest side of the house, the disturbed area has soil cement treated area, that is completely acceptable to you and would preclude any discussion of this 10-inch PVC solution that would go on the east and south side of the house.
What the applicant proposed in E23, E-023, and E-024 is a flow spreader with a line tie-in up to the north, coming from above Lot 4, coming down underneath that shared access lane, and going to a flow spreader just east of their driveway into the structure. That would require 680 square feet of PRA adjustment. And they are looking at the south of the property to increase the PRA by 680 feet.
But
And
that would be,
combined with the LIDA planter that is totally outside of the protected riparian area, meets the staff's requirements of first avoid and then minimize. We're looking at two different systems, so, you know, it's not a perfect scenario. But again, between the LIDA planter for the dwelling, this impervious area for the dwelling, and the flow spreader dealing with the uphill stormwater runoff, to take what was a sheet flow, like you were asking earlier, and managing it through a system of pipes and a flow spreader. That is an acceptable avoid, first avoid what you can, and then minimize, and then mitigate.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So the long and the short of it is this submitted as a part of the testimony proves that it's possible to achieve what is needing to be done to avoid the PRA. But that opens up more possibilities for continued conversation, correct? So where if they can come up with another design or a more inexpensive option to where it's not breaking the bank on the applicant, if they can come up with the design that is acceptable, it will be looked at. Or I'm just asking a question just because I need to get it out of my head here.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And is it okay if I keep? Okay. So again, what we have here was created, you can see on the upper right-hand corner, Chris Kitteridge, I believe, with Stantec, who is a stormwater engineer. I'm not quite sure exactly what his title is, but is part of the applicant's team with Stantec. And he, with Ryan O'Brien, put together this plan. And again, it's a feasibility plan. It shows the general location for the LIDA planter, the general location for the flow spreader. When we get, depending on what happens here tonight, let's say it is approved, then the next step is for them to put together a permit application for the actual detailed stormwater planters, the flow spreader and the LIDA planter. And as long as they are in substantial compliance with these, again, assuming that it's E-023 and E-024 that the commission approves tonight, there is plenty of flexibility working with our engineering team to come up with an actual stormwater management facility and look at that design, whether it's, and again, I'm not a stormwater professional, so I won't even try to posit scenarios under that. Assuming that they can move forward with that, that is a discussion between our engineering staff and their engineer and their professionals, the applicant's professionals.
If I can just perhaps simplify it in my word to your question.
Sorry.
The decision tonight, if it's final, would establish the boundary of the protected riparian area, and staff's recommending with an adjustment offset for the flow spreader. That would not be changed later, okay? The line is the line. Now, what I think Planning Director Hasty is saying, as long as they stay outside of the PRA line that is established, they can do whatever they want on the site.
You mean with the LIDA?
Right. You know,
Well, to clarify, if the commission approves the 680 square foot PRA adjustment, anything outside of that, whatever that's flow spreader for the upstream flow, how that gets designed, if it stays on the, looking at it from my perspective, we'll just say the east side of that new PRA line, we'll work that out. Staff will work that out with engineering.
So the sticking point is the LIDA.
And the LIDA, yes, if you approve this tonight, then they can design that stormwater facility on the east side of the protected riparian area.
And if we say, give them the 1,200 square feet so they can make it more reasonable?
Then I would ask you to provide findings to staff that clearly justify how the avoidance, minimize, and mitigate criteria have been met. Because we do have a proposal that does all of that, does that in a balanced way. What they're asking for is not just first avoidance. They have received or requested and received a reduction of the RP district. They have opened up this area for a stormwater facility for any development. And if you are going to approve their request, which is option 1, that is basically ignoring the fact that they have area outside of the protected riparian area, outside of the RP district in which to do this. So we would ask that you generate, as the commission, clear findings, because we don't have that precedent before. You would be creating a new precedent.
Well, and its findings to the criteria. And the term reasonable is not in the avoidance criteria or the minimization criteria. So it's not a balancing test to that. I don't know if you want to, I mean, it's in the staff report if you want to bring up the text as you deliberate. I mean, look at the text of the step 1 avoidance and step 2 minimization. That's what you should be, directing your deliberation towards.
This question is for further down the road. Would they get in for permits based off of what is
Conceptually shown here today.
correct? Yes, this criteria that's in front of us here showing that it is feasible. Will they be able to do any kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? A supplemental design after if something else is found to be more feasible, more cost-effective, less
If it stays on the
Massive.
east side of the protected riparian area boundary, sorry to interrupt, they can design a stormwater facility however they like.
Okay.
And planning staff at that point steps aside, because what we are here to do tonight is establish a boundary. And then the technical expertise of our engineering staff and the applicant's engineering team comes in, and they design it as they can.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, and maybe to Attorney Boone, is part of what we are dealing with is the appeal to modify, or is that now not part? In other words, must our motion include a denial of a request that is embodied in the appeal?
I can actually answer that too. So that's a good question. And again, I know there's been a lot of back and forth on a lot of information. So thank you so much for sticking with us, sticking with the applicant. So staff initially recommended denial of the PRA adjustment because we did not see sufficient evidence that they had first avoided all impacts. With the recent submittals, even after Friday's memo, where we were still recommending denial, with these recent submittals, I believe, we are now recommending approval of option 7, which is again exhibits E-023 and E-024, because we see that the applicant has met their burden of proof of first avoid, then minimize, and then we can mitigate. And Ellen's slides talk about that mitigation requirement, and apologies for that confusion there too.
And I'll just emphasize, your job is to find whether the criteria and standards are met. You don't need to worry about it.
Yep,
Is
that's
it
fine.
affirming an appeal?
I just wondered how
But yeah,
we're
how
handling.
to craft the motion.
Could
Yeah.
you put up the wording that you had for the approval of this?
Yeah.
Was it this slide just with the recommendation, or I do have the recommended conditions? But again, we do have some confusion. This should be 680.
Good. All right. No more questions. I think we can move into DRC deliberations. So the public hearing is now closed and the DRC will begin its deliberations. No public comment is permitted during deliberations. So Yes, so I guess moving into the deliberations here, but
Yeah. Well, I'll go first.
yeah.
Excuse me. I think what's been stated by our planning director and by our planner is that the idea that our ordinance calls for avoidance, and if not possible, then mitigation. And there's a plan that does that, or pretty much minimizes that, and which is the option 7, the one that we were just showing. And I would wholeheartedly support that. However, the other one, I understand there's taller walls and more costs involved, but it doesn't meet the city's ordinance, our requirements, and I can't support that.
I appreciate everyone's professional expertise, and it has been an up and downhill type of deal so far. And I realize that has created a certain amount of frustrations. So let's put that behind us and see if we can move forward. For me, I am pleased to hear that the city recommends option 7. But I also understand the construction costs that are dealt with option 1. And I look at the PRA, and I've seen the PRA being reduced on the different lots, and on this lot, I know that area was a horse pasture. It doesn't seem sacred to me as some PRAs could be. So I'm flexible with either option. I actually lean a bit towards option 1 because if I was building it, that's where I would do it.
Yeah, a lot of emotions, a lot of information for everybody to take in. The biggest sticking point for me is the fact that we're provided that detail with Stantec header on it that shows that it was possible to do without approaching or damaging the PRA or even being that involved, because that was one of the reasons why things kept getting denied, was because the option wasn't shown. Then they gave the option. I know it still needs to be engineered, but it showed that it could possibly, that it's a possibility. So I'm for supporting the staff's recommendation.
Which option are you saying then? Option 7?
Option 7.
Correct.
Okay.
I understand we have codes and cleared objective standards. I just remember several years ago, I was in the city of Portland building department. Maybe it was planning. I can't remember. It was in a line. And the man in front of me turned around to me and he said, "Portland, the city that works. I think it's a city that works you over." And I'm feeling that from our staff tonight through this whole thing. And it's exhausting for everybody. And I understand that we have a protective riparian area. But there has to be a middle ground here, and I go with option 1. It just makes more sense. They're already dealing with the supposedly water sheathing down from a failed system above it, and they're paying for that kind of mitigation. That's how I feel.
Well, excuse me. I feel we need to remind ourselves we have a responsibility. Our responsibility is to enforce the codes. The code is crystal clear on this, in my view, that if it is possible to avoid an incursion into these protected areas, we should not allow an incursion. And so for me, it is that clear. The second item that has come up, which I think reflects on this cost discussion, is that owner preference is not a factor that we consider in approving something like this. I think we have seen one of many options for relocating this LIDA area. There was discussion at our last meeting about moving the pool just 5 or 6 feet further to the east, that whole pool complex. And all of a sudden, there's all sorts of room, no major walls required. Now, we, again, are just looking at cartoons for the most part. But the Stantec is not a cartoon. It's a specific design that said, here is something that can be done. And it may be undesirable to have an 8-foot free wall that will, no, it's a 14-foot wall. It's an 8-foot free, the wall, again, I've probably designed and built more retaining walls than anybody in this room. The retaining wall is a significant structure that will cost a lot of money. From my point of view, and I think the owner expressed this, the safety issue of an 8-foot wall is an important factor. Again, there are ways to mitigate that. There are fences that can keep the grandchildren from falling down and so forth and so on. But I come back to our responsibility is to enforce the code. The code is clear. There is a clear representation in the information that I've seen that there is an alternative that is feasible, and therefore I will support the recommendation that the staff had summarized on that sheet.
But it's only feasible after studies of...
That's the second phase.
Right.
But again, I point out...
So it's feasible in quotes.
There are many alternative sites. This is one of the ones that's been developed, yes, or demonstrated.
I think that I'm for option 7 as well, because it does avoid, and once we have the boundary set, then like Joanna had said, this is still in the planning phase. There's still a lot of designing and calculations to be done. So, there could be less impact with a future design that is developed with this option 7 boundary set in place. So I support the staff's recommendation.
Thank you, commissioners. So with that, we can, excuse me. I'm going to ask commissioners for a motion to vote.
I will make a motion in 3 parts. Part number 1 is that we approve the staff recommendations for the changes to the PRA boundary. Number 2, that's the boundary shown on E-024, right? Second is that we approve the recommendation to develop option 7 as shown as an alternative or other alternatives that meet the criterion of not intruding into the protected area. And number 3 is that we support staff recommendations on condition A, paren 1A. And condition A4.
Should we be breaking this down into 3 different votes?
What?
Should we be breaking this down to 3 different votes, or,
I put them
These
all
are the
together.
conditions. Conditions.
I know?
So it's voting in favor of option 7 or not in favor.
Yeah, it's really, I object to that characterization. What we are voting for is to be consistent with the code or approve a variation on the code. Consistency with the code does not imply that it has to be option 7. It may be moving the pool or some other option, but we are denying the modification of the PRA because there is a feasible alternative.
For the LIDA, we are approving the encroachment in the PRA for the
Yes,
flow spreader.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think I made a motion in 3 parts, but it can be split if someone would like to.
Excuse me, can you go back to the prior slide?
Could,
Yeah, first we need to approve the map correction and redelineation.
Yes, that's my
And
number
PRA
1.
adjustments on 7 and 8. I mean, what? Make it easy.
could I try to make a motion, if that's okay? I would make a motion to approve the requested map correction of the RP district wetland, negating the previous delineation of the wetland in LU 23-0011, 2, redelineation of the map corrected wetland RP district, and 3, PR modification of the map corrected redelineated wetland proposals for parcels 7, 8, and 9 based on option 7 and also based on the conditions of staff.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my motion and second yours.
Administration, please call the roll.
Commissioner Sangre?
Aye.
Commissioner O'Connor?
Aye.
Commissioner Dews?
Aye.
Commissioner Bates?
Abstain.
Commissioner Leek?
Aye.
Commissioner Mino?
Aye.
Chair Lindstrom?
Aye.
Right, this is a tentative decision by the commission, and the findings we brought back to the commission on, I forgot to check the, today's the 3rd,
So the next public hearing will be on March 17th.
at 7 PM?
That is at 7 PM, and with the project management update, I can talk to you about the format and timing for that.
Okay. So that is the end of item number 4, the public hearing. So now we're moving into item number 5 on the agenda, the schedule review and management update.
Okay, so a number of updates here, but I'll try to go through them really quickly. First of all, the tree appeal for the, I don't remember the number of trees, but there was a request for a hearing, a public hearing for the removal of trees on 310G Avenue. That has since been withdrawn. That was originally scheduled for March 17th, but that is no longer on the docket. The appellant has withdrawn the request for a public hearing, and so it's moving into the building permit phase. So we're very grateful for that, because I know that that probably would have been another contentious hearing. So we have that setting aside. We do have a public hearing scheduled for April 7th for a new project. It's a quadplex project in the DRDD. That is LU 24-0033, and it's an Ellen Davis project. So she'll be back on the 7th, April 7th, to present on that one. I do have kind of a general update for the city council, the tree appeals for 233E Avenue. I think before, when we met, they had tentatively approved AP 24-04, which was for the 22 on-site trees. The city engineer and planning staff are, and so they're going to adopt the findings on tomorrow? They're going to adopt the findings for tomorrow on that. Sorry, there's so many dates now. The AP 24-05, which was for the one tree for the right-of-way improvements, the alley improvements, that was postponed. They are going to be meeting on March 18th to go over city engineer memo that was drafted with planning's assistance, talking about the right-of-way improvements and addressing the council request for further information on that. So on March 18th, when we meet again, I will not have an update for you on that, but when we meet in the first meeting of April, I will let you know how that turned out at City Council. And obviously, you can read about it on the City Council agenda or watch that meeting as well. So 233 Avenue, 310G Avenue, some updates on there. Any questions about that? Sorry, that wasn't the most coherent presentation. Okay. I have also continued to work with Paul Espy, who is an associate planner and is the Historic Resources Advisory Board staff liaison, HRAB. And Paul Espy worked with a historic preservation professional a number of years ago about the presentation on the historic preservation standards. And he's continuing to work with them to try and put that presentation together. I think we're looking at one of the meetings in April, but we haven't nailed that down yet. We're still looking at finalizing the presentation, figuring out the fees and invoicing that, but hopefully at some point in April. And again, the urgency on that one is less because we have not heard back from the property owner / applicant on whether or not they want to move forward with the major alteration to the Anglers Club, which is kind of pushing or feeding into this need to kind of get the commission's understanding of the historic preservation standards up to speed at your own request. And then finally, looking at March 17th for adoption of findings for tonight's land use application LU 24-036. That is along with the minutes for last meeting and this meeting, plus the findings. Those are the only only items on the agenda. We don't even have a council update because that's the second meeting of the month. So it is, if with the commission's approval, we can meet on Zoom and we can meet at 6 p.m. So I'll let you know how we would like to do that.
Good.
I'm all for 6 p.m. Zoom meeting if the rest of the commissioners are.
Me too.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Just
Okay.
as a note on that March 17th video meeting, I will be absent.
Okay, thank you for letting us know. And again,
Since that's an irregular schedule and date, I would suggest a motion to meet on March 17th at 6 p.m.
I would like to
On
make a
Zoom.
motion to meet at 6 p.m. on March 17th via Zoom.
I second.
All
favor?
those in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
And again, before I move on from the project management, I just want to express my appreciation to everyone on the commission. I know these last couple of hearings have been really difficult, and this project has not moved smoothly. And, I think at times my frustration with the applicant's team has bled through, and so that's something for me to work on. But I want to congratulate Senior Planner Ellen Davis, who had to take over for this project for me halfway through when I was promoted to planning manager, not planning director, although that sounds fancier. But she has done an absolutely stupendous job of coming into a project in the middle of it and managing it with extreme professionalism and patience. And I just want to thank her for that. I know that you heard some negative comments tonight, and again, I understand their frustration. This has been a very complicated project. I've never experienced anything like this. And I know that their motivations are different, and we do come, when we're implementing the code, it is cold, hard bureaucratic facts, and that's a difficult place to be in. But anyway, I want to express my appreciation to the commission for the download of massive amounts of information and for your very thorough and thoughtful deliberations tonight. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I also want to express my gratitude to city staff. Thank you for all the information. There's so much information. And thank you, commissioners. Commissioner Sangre, thank you for the reminder of the charge of the Development Review Commission and what our mission is and what we're supposed to be doing up here. I appreciate everybody's insight, and the experience is amazing. I'm part of a great team, or great commission. Everybody's very well respected in my eyes. And with that, I will move to adjourn the meeting. I got brain dead there for a minute. Coffee all quit at once. We just, oh, I'm still on air. Sorry.